Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navic's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navic.co. This episode is brought to you by Lakestar, one of the leading European venture capital firms. Lakestar's mission is to find, fund, and grow disruptive businesses that are enabled by technology and founded by exceptional entrepreneurs in Europe and beyond. Founded by Klaus Ammels, the team's early investments include Skype, Spotify, Facebook, and Airbnb, and since raising its first fund in 2012, Lakestar now manages an aggregated volume of over 2.8 billion euros across their early and growth stage funds. The team actively advises and supports portfolio companies in marketing, recruitment, technology, product development, and regulatory insight, accompanying founders from seed to early stage, growth stage, or exit. Lakestar's games and media team has made 18 investments, including 1047 Games, Zebedee, Modulate, and Trace. If you're interested in learning more or getting in contact with the Lakestar team, simply go to lakestar.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Navic Roundtable. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and with me, I have some great panelists. As always, we've got Dave Elton here and Maria as well. How are you guys doing?
I like your Fry t-shirt.
Yeah, trying to keep it interesting here visually for those people that watch the actual video.
I brought Doraemon with me. I also wanted a friend.
So we have some good topics today, though, as far as the news goes. Just not a lot of them. Microsoft with an interesting one around their milestones, I guess, for pay bumps or bonuses around Xbox. Should be interesting to dig into that. FaZe Clan, fortunately, maybe a happy ending for them, maybe not. And then Netflix still trying to act like they know what they're doing. And so we'll dig into that a little bit.
Whoa, shots fired already.
We'll get into the topic, but let's just start with Microsoft's one, a little softball topic for Dave there. What's going on with the CEO?
All right, we'll ease into things here before we get to the big stuff. Okay, so for the first time in 3 years, the CEO for Microsoft does not have a specific growth milestone target for Xbox Game Pass. Now, when you look at targets, especially when a CEO's pay base is based on performance-based targets, and I think Nadella's targets is something like 90% of his pay is based on him hitting targets. That is the way for the company, the board of directors, and them to steer, what or really visibly post what the targets are for the company or what's important for the company over the course of the next year. So the fact that Xbox Game Pass has been pulled from that starts to raise a few questions in terms of where does Game Pass sit inside of its the overall importance for the company. So is this a case of they feel that Game Pass has reached its goals, and it's time for it to set some new goals, set some new areas of focus for the CEO, or is it something else? Now, one of the questions that I have is the Game Pass really getting to where they want it to go? So last year, Microsoft aimed for about 73% growth for their subscriber numbers for Game Pass, and the actual result was around 28%. So for me, the question is this something that Xbox has seen? We've done a good shot at Game Pass, and we're going to kind of see where it goes from here, or do they actually feel like they've kind of reached their level that they're happy with and are now going to focus on other parts of the Xbox business overall? Now, Xbox accounts for about 10% of Nadella's overall targets. I think one of the cloud areas is his largest target region at about 30%. But still, 10% is a good chunk when your pay's in the 40s to 50s of millions of dollars. It's always good to be able to earn that extra $5 million if you're able to hit your targets. So I'm curious, what Maria and Devin, what you guys think, is the Xbox Game Pass, slowly being, not something that they're going to, do away with. I think it is still a very successful program for them, but is it now out of the spotlight? Do they feel comfortable with where it is, or is it something else?
So you mentioned the accounts. Does the CEO still have other targets related to Xbox?
I think it's overall growth, probably. I didn't take a look at what all the individual components were, but typically Xbox as a whole is about 10% of his performance pay.
And that's what's been removed with the Game Pass.
The Game Pass specifically has been removed as one of those targets. Like, one of the other targets was also that growth of the Xbox game division revenue by 4.4%, and I think they reached like 0.7%. So they do, like, there are a number of components inside each of those performance things, but the Xbox Game Pass was something for the last 3 years. And it could very well have been, hey, we don't need this on the CEO's focus. Maybe this just is now entirely on Phil's plate, and it may be up to Phil Spencer to cover that entirely. But the fact that it was on the CEO's plate for 3 years, it's now been removed. For me, is an interesting point, especially now that they've got a whole whack of new games about to start coming up on the Game Pass with the Activision purchase funding closing.
This to me is aligned. I have two things going through my mind: that it could be a negotiation, a renegotiation to get targets that are potentially, more reasonable to hit. And looking at Xbox Game Pass specifically perhaps was not the best incentive or the right place to focus. And it comes back to, I think we had this discussion last time, or one of the last times I was on the panel, about what role does Xbox Game Pass actually play in Microsoft. And so it could be that specific growth milestone, trying to keep on pushing it perhaps will it be a perverse incentive and lead to not the best decisions for the business overall. It could be playing a role that is best measured with growth in other areas, for example, cloud that you mentioned. And I personally am not reading into it that the growth of Xbox Game Pass itself is no longer relevant. We saw it starting to plateau, but its role and performance may have changed, and that's being measured through other compensation targets.
I guess the question that I have too is whether or not the targets, for growth, but what's like the penetration rate versus like the number of people that own an Xbox, right? Because that's, I would think, the real goal, right, is to like have a higher number of Xbox owners on the Game Pass. Like, they changed the gold membership, for example, to kind of merge it with that sort of thing. I can't imagine they're trying to target non-Xbox owners that are just on Windows. I personally have an Xbox Game Pass, and I don't own an Xbox past the 360, but I do use it for like the cloud stuff and for new games and things like that. So like I'm not the average target market, I don't think. So I'm wondering if they've already kind of hit those numbers in terms of like penetration of that like percentage of that. And they're like, okay, well, now we don't need to worry about the growth as much, because that was the important part of it, is just making sure that maybe a majority of Xbox owners are getting that Game Pass. But then I also have to wonder if like they don't want to be overly aggressive with that, in the sense that if it's cannibalizing game sales to some extent too, like they don't want everyone relying completely on that. Like, if growing it overly aggressively starts to then take away from people buying stuff because they go, well, I have the Game Pass, I'm not going to buy games. Like, obviously, like Starfield might have been a really interesting one to see if they had like numbers in terms of, I mean, they had good sales numbers, right? But I would love to see like how many people either tried it first on there, like for free, or people that just straight up decided not to buy it by playing it on there. Especially if they were just kind of not happy with what they played and just like, no, I'm not going to buy this. Obviously, games don't stay on there forever, kind of like how stuff rotates off Netflix. So there is, like some protection, I think, against some cannibalization. But by the time a game comes off, if it was like day one release, like they're not going to get a sale that late into the cycle anyways, right? Which is why games get super discounted. So I guess I wonder if you have any insight there, Dave, on whether or not like there was some good penetration and they're just pulling back, or if it's just like refocusing.
Yeah, I don't think they've hit quite the attach rates that they want to. They were hitting some pretty aggressive targets last year. They fell well short of that. So I don't think they've hit their attach rate yet. I do expect that they will continue trying to push it. I do think that it still will end up being part of what Phil and the Xbox team are going to focus on. In part because it's a bit of that differentiation between themselves and Sony and Nintendo. Nintendo and Sony both have their own versions of it, but they both do not have that day one release for first party titles that Microsoft has. I'll admit I play Starfield on my Xbox Game Pass. So I do think it is still very much a very important thing. Maria, I think you're right that I think Microsoft as a whole just went, there are bigger fish for them to fry in terms of where Nadella's, focus should be and needs to be. But I do think it'll still be part of Phil's overall target to try to continue growing that. And I do think the addition of the Activision titles will certainly help along those lines as well.
I can only imagine if people were able to play Diablo 4 on that, like, and there was like a high attach rate, like that could have potentially hurt the sales of that game, because people wanting to just be like, I don't know, I'm skeptical now of like Blizzard after, Diablo Immortal. Like, I kind of want to just try that. I mean, I had been I think in a previous episode here that like I had ended up just refunding Payday 3 without even playing it, because I realized I could just, I'm from Steam, because I realized I could just play it on the Game Pass and decide first after seeing a lot of the negative reviews. And I can't imagine that's like, going to be that uncommon of a thing to do if people are skeptical, where like, the amount of people that buy things like a pre-order, right, for beta access, things like that, and then end up maybe like a little bit burned. Maybe that helps avoid that or mitigate that. But the other question I have for you, Dave, is, I know the cloud stuff is also part of, like, a big part of what he's getting the bonuses for and stuff. Now, I do wonder if that includes the xCloud stuff for the Xbox Game Pass, right? Because that's all cloud stuff as well, running on their servers, or is it just like we're talking like Azure stuff and those kinds of things?
Yeah, no, that was enterprise.
Okay,
enterprise side of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how much overlap there is in the actual company as well, right? Because those, like, they do try and use those enterprise servers as game servers and stuff, right? As well, like they'll try and get game developers to use those. So I imagine there's like some overlap, but probably maybe not with the cloud side of things.
They would separate those out in terms of business units, like because that's a service that's being provided to others versus games that they're actively, either publishing or releasing somehow.
Makes sense. And when did did it say when this actually happened? Meaning, like, if he was getting his bonuses, like, say at the end of the year, did they do that like immediately at the start of this last year? Like, when did this happen?
Their fiscal year ends end of June.
Okay, so it's just like right at the end of that. I mean, like as soon as the next fiscal year started.
They generally, the fiscal year, generally they start working on what the performance targets are.
Yeah, I just asked because, like, obviously, like, they made that decision at a certain point in time. So I wonder if, like, by, say, June, they'd kind of hit those targets. Obviously, Microsoft hadn't even finished its acquisition yet of Activision Blizzard, but that, that was like a year plus process. So at some point, they were probably like, all right, that's enough time, to wait for that. As I don't think we're getting most of those games, from what they said, until 2024 on Game Pass. Correct. Anyways. And 2024 is kind of a rather large span, and as we know, like, when most people say a date range like that, they usually mean the end of it. So I'm like expecting December 2024 we'll finally get the games for this year.
I think they'll probably trickle them in. I don't think they'll just do one giant batch. It'll take time for them to put in all of the Xbox Live login information and make sure that that's all sorted out appropriately.
It would be interesting to see if they were able to use that to try and get people back and to say, let's say, from what I've heard, like 99% of people have turned off Diablo 4, right? I don't know how true that is. And I don't know if that changed when Season 2 launched recently and Steam picked up. But I do wonder if, like, that could be a way to try and bring players back later on, try and get them to purchase Season Passes again. like if they've churned to get people to come back. It's like, well, I got the Game Pass anyways, and technically it's free to play, and then they like dip back in. That might be something that's useful for Blizzard and Blizzard really having like a lot of trouble with their live service in general. So I don't know, maybe some opportunity there. I guess we'll see what Microsoft does or doesn't do with the company as they run it. But yeah, some interesting stuff as well on some gaming stuff that's working out or not working out in terms of finances. FaZe, who we've seen go through a bit of a cycle, finally managed to get picked up, but not for, I don't think, the price they were hoping for.
Yeah, well, we can go more into that. I'll do a very quick overview of what my conclusion was. And then, if the conversation leads there, we can dive into more of the specifics. So FaZe Clan was acquired. It was an all-stock deal for $17 million by Gamesquare. And I started my analysis, based on how their valuation when they went public with the SPAC. I wanted to understand, like, how good is this deal to get FaZe for 17 million? Because it's a low number, but what's the actual value that they're acquiring? And my conclusion was it could be a bargain if Gamesquare's strategy of appealing to brands gets executed. But for them to do that, they really need to get FaZe Clan's operations running smoothly and do cost reduction because it's in the losses, really. And so, yeah, if they can restructure FaZe rapidly, and the original founders are now rejoining as the leadership of FaZe, if that mix goes well, there are some concerns there. We can discuss them in a little bit. If that goes well, I'm actually really excited for the next steps of FaZe. I think it could become a lean, independent arm of Gamesquare that specializes in attracting and engaging players, consumers of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Because Gamesquare's strategy is to create an end-to-end tech and data platform that brands can create partnerships with. So they have the content creators, they have the tech. And so what, a lot of traditional brands are now struggling with is to understand the motivations, the interests, the culture of these younger generations. And so bringing FaZe in and having that partnership within Gamesquare, I think is a very strong proposition to brands of, hey, we have a turnkey solution end to end, and we have content creators that are integrated in esports, and they have proven track record of being able to create new esports stars and new content stars, and that can attract and appeal these younger generations. And then I was also looking at Gamesquare's history, and it was really interesting. It was a good opportunity because it's from my fellow country and your country, David. Let's go Canada. And I was looking at the history of M&A of Gamesquare and how they've been able to integrate operations effectively. And then also they have a proven track record of being able to reduce costs. And they are showing that, quarter on quarter with being able to get that journey into profitability. And then when we look at all of the businesses that at least contain esports in their business model, I think like seeing Gamesquare and then that acquisition of Complexity and seeing them diversify their portfolio, they knew that content creation and esports is not a sustainable business model, and diversifying it towards having this end-to-end tech platform, having a data platform that allows you to do attribution and understand the return on investment of these content brand partnerships. It makes me hopeful that, FaZe is now with a parent company that knows what it's doing, understands the business model of the market, and is integrated in this more sustainable business model. And so, do you have any thoughts about the FaZe acquisition before I go into more detail?
I mean, I'm just curious if FaZe said it was a good deal, like when they were, announcing it. Obviously, like a lot of times in these kind of deals, they do like be like, oh yeah, we're so happy. This was like a wonderful thing for us. But like, was it a pretty positive spin coming out of FaZe, or was it like, well, we just took what we could get?
I mean, it was silence. FaZe in September, it was a chairperson of the board exited. The CEO was also let go. The contract was terminated a few days later. And now it's come to light that it was part of the acquisition deal that the CEO had to exit. the original founders, well, we go back to the controversy of the original founders because a big portion of the depreciation of FaZe's value is associated to the original founders being very public in their critiques of the leadership, because they brought in, air quote, the suits. And then the suits decided to do this SPAC when clearly the business model and their expectations to become profitable were truthfully unrealistic, even in a bull crypto market. And then it didn't go well. And they started to move away from, esports, and they were focusing on, because like FaZe's culture was about bringing people into the culture of FaZe, becoming brand ambassadors because they loved what FaZe was doing, their connection with the community, the content that they were creating. And again, air quote, the suits were more focused on, let's bring in these really big names and let's pay them like Snoop Dogg. And as soon things started to go bad in terms of the money that they were making, the people that were being paid left. And they were, focusing their attentions on brand partnerships that weren't, specifically content creation for esports. Anyway, and then there's more controversy about toxic culture, mass layoffs, misogyny, and I won't go into all of that. That's been discussed to great lengths. And so the original founders were very public in their critiquing of the leadership. And there was just a brand downfall, honestly. Like FaZe, before, you would be in a meeting discussing, we want to do a brand partnership and activation with esports and content creators. And everyone would think, yeah, FaZe is the right person to do it with. And by the end of, this campaign, no one, really wanted to poke a stick at FaZe because of all the PR brand image nightmares that they were going through. And so there are a lot of great discussions happening about this. We'll have to see. I'm more positive in my belief that Gamesquare, this is an acquisition. And so even though the original founders are leading it, Gamesquare's business model is all about the brand partnerships. And though they have to clean up the image of FaZe, but I think, to answer your question, Devin, it was a message of silence from FaZe. There was a celebration that the original founders are now back. The suits, air quotes, have left. And now it's, in FaZe's hands to rebuild their image and their culture.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest questions, and something that I think you posed at one point, right, is is it a marketing thing, or is it like a big business for profit thing? Like what is esports trying to be? I mean, there's been the comparisons between esports and traditional sports. But I think the biggest problem is you look at esports as a whole, is that some of the games are treated as actual business, where the games were created, the leagues and everything were created in order to ensure that there's the opportunity for players to make money, for the games to actually be seen as a sport. And in other cases, the companies treat the games as or the esports versions of the games as marketing exercises. That's all that they're looking for. It's just it's not a revenue generating area of business. It's a cost center. And I think part of the challenge that esports has as a whole is that you've got those two different styles of business models all being mixed into the same conversation. In some ways, it's almost the same as if the Dallas Cowboys, they were a for-profit football team, and they're going to do all that they can to win. And the Miami Dolphins, they do it just because it's a fun marketing exercise and everyone wants to party in Miami anyways. So let's just bring everybody there to party. But that's not how real sports are worked. That's not how those organizations do well. Those organizations do well because everyone is trying to put the best product they can onto the field and make money as part of an actual business, not as just a marketing exercise. And I think that's where some of the promise around esports is that you do have those opportunities to bring in mass groups of people and large chunks of money. Like if you look at, the prize pools that Valve was able to bring in for Dota 2, like what was it? The international, I think in 2021 was like $40 million prize pool, which is fantastic. Now, at the same time, Valve came up with a fantastic system where the players actually feed in the majority of that prize pool money themselves rather than Valve putting it up. But, I think people look at that and say, okay, well, this is something we can carry across all of esports, but that's not what everyone is trying to do. It's different objectives for different companies.
Definitely, and that's why Gamesquare's history is very interesting. They know that, and they diversified into towards a sustainable business model. We look at Riot. They announced this year that they're still not profitable with their esports, and it's League of Legends. If League of Legends can become profitable with esports, truthfully, this is a marketing spend, and we need to embrace that it is a marketing spend. And even if there's tournaments and prize pools, the prize pools are for your players. And you can't depend on having it as a sustainable revenue stream. And then additionally, if we're looking at esports, it's about the creation. You could focus on trying to get diamond in the rough players and then you sell them. But that's not really scalable. And it's also a bit luck of the draw. And so, I think it's very interesting how Gamesquare is focusing on, we have esports as a content creation tool. We have public personas who are known and beloved by players and create a following through esports. Other content creators create a following through other means. And then we're going to do brand partnerships. For example, they announced that they're in progress to close a deal with a betting company who is going to do activations with their Counter-Strike teams, because Counter-Strike has a large population of players who are interested in betting. That makes sense. Yeah, I can see how this business model works. So that's my takeaway. We've discussed that many times here on the podcast, and so I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's time to accept that esports is not traditional sports. The FaZe valuation at the time was only acceptable through the lens that it was a traditional sports team. It is not. It's a marketing spend, and companies need to find sustainable business models if they include esports.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the esports are not the same as regular sports. It kind of has to be the important part to focus on, in the sense that people are trying to adapt a lot of sports models to it. And there's parts of it that work, like merch, right? People get, merch, team merch, you sell that. But all the other parts of regular sports were just built around a very different idea. They're not run by necessarily the developer of that game in physical sports. They're not run the same way in terms of the same business interests, as a marketing vehicle, for example. They're just very different businesses. And I think the important part of that, towards the thinking about towards the end of esports, as it is right now, right, where it's not over, but it's clearly going in a direction where people are finding out that if they didn't already realize it, that business model was not really feasible long term. If as you said, if League of Legends can't make it work, then at this point, maybe it actually just doesn't work like that. But the part that I found interesting, especially in regard to FaZe, was they were one of the companies that during, and I know I bring up Rainbow Six Siege a lot, but that's only because I was very close to it for a long time and got to see a lot of stuff. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that a couple of the big orgs would specifically, FaZe, would pick up Brazilian teams, partially because the game was very big there, but also partially because it was very cheap. They could pay them a very low salary, and it would go much farther there. Now, it was still not going that well there. I mean, it was still pretty low pay. They were still not doing great, and their computers were pretty old and things like that, so it wasn't the best. But the part that was interesting about that I think is kind of maybe towards where the future of this goes, and something that you mentioned about Gamesquare, was the idea of where these players, because they're being paid so little, would actually realize at some point they would make more money by being an influencer, by starting their own Twitch stream, by doing that sort of thing. And that's not the same thing you can have in traditional sports. You're not going to have Joe Montana playing football in his backyard and live streaming that, and that's how he's making all his money, is people subbing to his backyard football, right? It doesn't work that way, but it does in electronic sports, in playing video games at home, especially post-COVID, right? Where we had that whole transition where everyone was playing them from home, and even esports tournaments were run online. And so it's this sort of situation where if people are making more money that way, and you're starting to see more of these brands have content creators they're sponsoring rather than just players, they're starting to be like, oh yeah, I play for FaZe, but I'm not like a player. I'm just a content creator, or like I'm just sponsored on my stream. At some point, it starts to make me wonder if maybe we go away from the athletic team model and more around people that perform well, but are performing well on their personal streams and are more content creators. And it's more of a brand sort of thing rather than a team. Because you see the issues with people transferring between teams, trying to manage like personalities, doesn't really quite work the same as it does traditional sports. We don't have like drafts quite the same way and things like that. And so I think just that sort of disconnect may lead that direction. But I don't know. That's my personal take. Is the direction I've seen it go is everyone just being influencers, and that's where the real money's at, both for these organizations and for the players. And this idea of like everyone making money off of the game developer sponsoring these tournaments clearly isn't where it's at. Which, I mean, it's ironic because like one of the bigger ones is like Counter-Strike, and Valve's like extremely hands off with that, right? They're not even running it. It's just like when people run tournaments because it's just a popular game. And you look at some even the big tournaments where it's just influencers like Twitch Rivals and those kind of ones where it's not even really technically the athletes. It's just celebrity tournaments, like a celebrity golf tournament kind of thing. So that's just my 2 cents on, I think, where maybe it could go to be a business model if it's just going to be marketing anyways, but maybe not funded by the games. Maybe it is like a little bit, but maybe more so by these brands.
And I just love that you just suggested that we mash 2 old school games, backyard sports and Joe Montana football. I see
it's the new Madden
right there.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't even know who Joe Montana is. I'm imagining a cowboy because it has Montana and it's a Mountie.
Quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers.
Got it. Definitely. And that's not new. That if we look at, for example, tennis, you win a championship in tennis, and then you're going to make more money from the visibility and the how do you call it? It's not publicity, but yeah, the brand partnerships that you get to wear their jersey or be in their ads. And it's the same for esports players. That's where they're going to focus on the revenue. So I think you're bang on that, Devin.
Well, I think the other aspect too is it's really hard to have like the personalities show in esports with the way esports are run, right? Because like you'll occasionally see the people on stage, you'll get these occasional interviews, but you're watching the game, and the game's not the physical people like it is in sports. You can see the physical sports. You can see people do a touchdown dance and the touchdown thing. They can show off their personality, whereas in like esports, you're just seeing the characters they're playing as most of the time. And I think that again is like another disconnect on that. Exactly what you're saying about like trying to carry their personality out in the other thing. Whereas if they're an influencer kind of person or like a personal streamer, like they get to show their personality the whole time. Like obviously in tennis, like they're an individual. It's not a team sport most of the time. So like it's a little easier for like someone that's just, one of those angry players or one of those other people with a lot of personality to show that off. It doesn't, I mean, I know it like in Rainbow Six, it was one of those things where it was like, there was a few really strong personalities. And like it got to the point where Ubisoft was like, let's lean into that because that's the only way we can kind of like keep people really interested in this is to have some like one player would just even decide I'm the heel of this game. If you're familiar with the term from wrestling, like he's just like, I'm the heel, I'm going to play the bad guy kind of thing. So
tennis definitely has a few heels as well, and they're fun to watch.
We'll see. I feel like this is a discussion we'll kind of come back to occasionally just because like it's a sort of tangential business to video games that we've seen a lot of struggles in marketing in general in games on different platforms. And this was one avenue for it. And influencers have obviously really changed how games are marketed in general. Like we're past the days of running commercials or ads in comic books and things like that. It's very much getting people to play your game on their Twitch streams and stuff now. So it wouldn't surprise me if they just take a different angle on it when they're looking to market their game and maybe move away from let's just force this to be an esport. But anyways, speaking of people having to shift their business models, trying to do things new and interesting, whether they're a good idea or not, we'll see. Netflix continuing to also try and be part of games.
So Netflix had a great third quarter. They added more subscribers than anyone was expecting. They added in 8.76 million global subscribers in the third quarter. And they did better in terms of earnings. So overall, they had a great third quarter, better than the street was expecting. Now, in part of their investors' call afterwards, they did start addressing the games business overall. And the co-CEOs had a number of things to say about the business, where it is today, where they see it going, and some of their strategy towards it. So they referred to it as the crawl, walk, run cycle, and they believe they're really just in the crawl stage right now. So comparatively, they don't see themselves as spending a lot of money towards the division yet, and they do recognize that it's not driving up like a rocket ship. They're not increasing their game sales as quickly as they are. They're adding new subscribers. And they certainly did try to put sort of the Netflix view to it. They did claim that the trajectory for adding players is not dissimilar to what they've seen when they've gone into new regions where traditional Western media may not be the strongest, such as going into a country like Japan or going into Latin America. So they see themselves as, this is something that they're going to take their time and they're going to build out, as they go with realistic expectations in terms of growth there. Now, they do also suggest that they feel they have, especially in terms of the mobile side of things, been able to actually solve some of the challenges around mobile in terms of user acquisition and discovery. And they believe that they're able to do that through their recommendation platform. So this is the same technology that recommends, based on what you've watched, new TV shows to watch, new movies to watch. Through the Netflix platform, they're going to be recommending games. Now, one of the challenges they have overall with that is that the games so far have been almost entirely mobile. And 75% of their user base or their users use not mobile for consuming Netflix. So they're mostly watching it through their television, some watching it through their PC. But only a fraction of the overall users are consuming Netflix content through their mobile phone. And with that, you're also starting to see now, some of the reasons for why they are expanding out and trying to get the games onto smart TVs and other smart devices. So that started off with a small, beta launch inside Canada. That launch is now expanded out to a small number of subscribers in the United States. So you're now seeing being able to play only a couple of Netflix games on your television using your mobile phone as your controller. So they do recognize where their viewers are, and they are starting to try and get the games to where those viewers are, or where the majority of the viewers are. So, but they are seeing it as taking a bit of time. Now, the other part that they also have seen as challenge is the types of games. So when they were first acquiring games for the Netflix games platform, they were really, it was a bit of a challenge because you had an unknown group of people or people that are very much experienced in the world of television and film, reaching out to game developers and saying, hey, come make games for us. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of people that were reluctant initially, especially at that time. It was still very much a boom cycle for the mobile business. People were a little reluctant to make games for a subscription business where it was unknown as to what the uptake would be by the subscribers. And they had a very short time period in order to get some of those initial games made. So, Netflix was building out the portfolio as best as they could in the beginning. They're now at a point, though, where they've got some data in place, and they're starting to see, well, these are the types of games that our players are interested, our subscribers are interested in playing. And, Netflix is known for many things, but one thing they're definitely known for is the creation and using of data. And they are certainly going to be using that to really refine the games that they start bringing into their portfolio and start servicing to their players, and having a better understanding over time, what works better for their mobile players, what works better for their TV players. So, over time, I think we'll really start seeing a well-refined machine. Now, one of the big challenges they have is one of the reports inside the last couple of days is that Netflix is still only about 1% of their overall subscribers are playing games on a daily basis. So even though Netflix has basically tripled their number of titles since last year, they're still needing to work on how do they get their subscribers playing the games. Now, part of that is getting it off of just mobile, where instead of if they've got around 200, almost 250 million subscribers, if you're only able to access 25% of them on mobile, then obviously going to different platforms will allow you to get to a lot more subscribers. And I think if you look at an overall picture, why is it that Netflix is really pushing into mobile or into games, I should say, sorry. Probably the very similar reason as to why they're also pushing in some other areas, into the retail streams, into sports. One thing that an insider intelligence analyst pointed out is the more revenue streams that Netflix is able to point to, the better they'll look to Wall Street as they start, tapping out the number of total subscribers they can have. They need to be able to point to some good news in order to make sure that the stock prices keep going up and up and up. So the more revenue streams, the more areas they're able to make money, the better. And in addition to that, they're still trying to work on engagement. They still see mobile games or games in general as being the opportunity for super fans to engage with their content in between seasons. So that's where Netflix is right now. So I agree, they're very much still in the crawl stage. They've brought on a lot of really smart people. I think that they will certainly start getting there, and they'll start using the vast troves of entertainment data that they've acquired to big effect. They still have the biggest challenge still for them is that it does require a subscription in order to be able to play their games. But they've got a very large subscription pool to start playing with.
Yeah, you're talking about the different revenue streams. And I remember reading, I just confirmed that Netflix doing live experiences. So not only the brand partnerships with brand, e-commerce, clothing, whatever that is, but also, a restaurant themed with Netflix. And so that shows that they're exploring. Now, I am concerned they're going to use their recommendation system to recommend me games, because they keep recommending me horror and true crime, and I don't even watch it. I always give a thumbs down to try to teach the algorithm, I don't want to watch this. Stop showing it to me. And it still hasn't learned. And I've been with Netflix for many years. But we'll have to see. In terms of the 1% of players engaging with the games, I didn't know about the 75% being console. That's a really interesting data point. In any case, even on mobile, I started to play their games when they were first coming out, and it definitely felt like they were focused on quantity and not quality of the experiences. And so it was very hit and miss. Like some games just really felt unpolished, and that maybe they received a lump sum and they got into the store. And so I stopped playing them because I got tired of not having a good experience. And then additionally, the discoverability is hard. It's not even at the top of the app, or it doesn't even have a button to get there. You have to find it on your mobile where the feed is, or go to the store. And so just the UX of finding the games. And then even when you find the games, it's just this long list of things you can install. There's no classification or organization. I have to understand what's going on. So there's a lot happening here for that 1%. I don't think, it's not just because it's players are on console. It's the experience itself on mobile is not great. And then the quality is also hit and miss. I was going to say something else on the mobile. I'm part of Code Coven, which is a mentorship program that's done in collaboration with Netflix, and I've had the opportunity to meet some of the team that works on Netflix developing games. And honestly, they are so intelligent and their processes are so advanced. So I'm confident that they have the talents to make some really good games. And I'm not as bearish on Netflix and the games that they're making. They are in the crawl phase. I do feel like mobile was that experimental ground, like you said, quantity to get data and understand how their subscribers will interact with it and what their preferences would be to get it running. So yeah, I'm looking forward to when they get out of the crawl phase.
Yeah. And just one point of clarification: it's not necessarily console that 75%. Is also the smart TVs that have the Netflix app that you can play it on. So just mobile versus large screen.
Yeah.
But that could be through console, that could be through smart television, that could be through like a
there's so much that they can do as well through making it more gamified. Having achievements per game and showing the completion percentage. If I saw that I have progressed, I don't know, like 60% of the game, I might reinstall it or decide, oh, I haven't found anything that I want to watch on Netflix. I'm just going to quickly play this game, and then go to bed. So, yeah, I think it's very exciting if they can execute it well. And so I'm hoping they will, and that it is just a crawl phase, because I do see the potential that they're chasing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you remember when, like the time between when Netflix announced that they were going to start doing games and then when they started publishing games was incredibly short. Like that was just a situation where Netflix says, all right, we're doing games, and 6 months from now sounds like a good date. Go. And so it was like a mass effort just to try and get games onto the platform. I was on one of the teams that put a game out on the Netflix when it was part of the launch. So it certainly was not a long time period to try and get the games into place. Now that being said, Netflix is stuck with those games and allowed them to continue to live ops them. So I would suggest, if there is a game that you liked for a few minutes in those first days, then kind of got tired of it, you may want to try and go back and take a look at it, because chances are they've actually probably live ops some and improved the game.
I haven't played it, but I really want to play the Love Island game, because apparently is their best performing game. I want to find out why.
I believe I know what the the game with the highest engagement is, but it's probably not what you think it is. I can't say which one it is, but
you can't.
No.
Oh, well, why tease us?
Because teasing's fun sometimes.
So it's not the dating sim game. Got it. I'm surprised by
that. But I do think that we definitely will start seeing. I mean, we've already started seeing it now, where a lot of people are talking to Netflix right now. They do see the potential in it as a platform for game companies. I mean, it's guaranteed revenue for them, so it certainly is something that, especially in today's day and age, something that's very interesting for game developers. Netflix is going to be a lot more choosy now about the types of games they're looking for, because they do now have that beginnings of a library in place, and they're going to start looking for the ones that either they need more data on in that particular genre, or they know it's a genre that does well for their users. So
what surprises me is there's an opportunity that, like, I would imagine that they would tap into that I don't think they have, that I've seen, that seems kind of obvious, at least to me, which is, they know that the second screen experience is a thing, right? That people are generally, when they're Netflix and chilling, they're also on their phones, right? And like, I imagine that's part of why the strategy was like, let's go to the phones, because that's what's competing with eyeballs on our actual screens, right? But the fact that they're not, so like, Netflix was one of the many streaming services that likes to be really pushy during the credit sequences, where they're like, "Oh, you wanted to watch the credits? No, you're going to watch us advertise our other programs. They take up 75% of the screen, and the credits are going to be like, and we're going to make it really hard to watch them." But they don't use that opportunity then to push you towards games that you might like related to it as a QR code, because it's an opportunity where you're on your phone, you're just like, "Oh, hey, I'll just scan that, boom. Now I'm in the App Store. Now I'm like actually potentially about to download it." if it's like tangentially related to it. Like obviously they pushed the Stranger Things games, right? Where they had a couple of those. Very easy when you hit the end of the season, that's the current season, and they're not like there's nothing more to watch. Like that's a good time to push people to it, right? So they could, as you said, continue to engage with the IP and the experience. And a lot of the statements were like about how they want to extend IP and make IP like more part of it. But it doesn't sound like they're trying to do that in a way that it's like either parallel with watching the shows or movies, or like as a like sort of tail end of it, or even a beginning of it, or like some of those games that try and do something that's like interactive with the show. Like there's a lot of different opportunities that like seem like easy ideas. And, I imagine they might have thought of a lot of this stuff and then tried it in small areas and it just didn't work. Like it's totally possible if they do tons and tons of data analysis. But I did find it kind of interesting that they started leaning into like console type games, but like old school ones. So like they were touting Dead Cell in there. And like one of the games that I had picked up from Netflix just because it was like, oh, hey, it's a free copy of a game that I like, was that Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. That was like that retro one. And it was like, cool, like I could play it for free now, and it's got the full multiplayer and everything, just because basically Netflix is subsidizing it for me because I already own Netflix. So it's like, it didn't really change anything about my relationship to Netflix or my experience or anything like that, but I was just like, all right, cool, free game. But then they're putting out stuff like Shovel Knight as well. And so it seems like in the Stranger Things one was very much like a old SNES kind of game. So it seems like that sort of like retro like console kind of experience or arcade experience was when they leaned into a lot with more of like the premium style games that weren't like mobile type games. They're more like almost like ports. Like Dead Cells was very much kind of a port. So was the Ninja Turtles one. And I don't know if that's like done well for them or not, because I don't know what the data looks like on that. But I found that kind of interesting that was like something they gravitated to a lot. And I mean, I imagine Dead Cells must have done well for them to bring it up in that discussion, that interview. But that's not really tied to any IP that they do anything with, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll do a show, right? Vampire Survivors is going to get a show. Like, I was just watching some of the Captain Laserhawk one that's like tied to Ubisoft stuff with tons of game stuff. Obviously, Cyberpunk on Netflix did quite well as well, and I'm sure that's part of how Captain Laserhawk got greenlit was off the success of Cyberpunk. And
it was so good. I just want to
so stuff like that, right? Like seems like there's plenty of opportunity for them to sort of tie those things in better. And I don't think mobile's a problem with that, because it just depends on how you approach it, the developers you partner with, the type of second screen or primary screen experience that you're doing. Obviously, like if people aren't playing on a system where they could just suddenly switch into playing a game on that thing, and most people aren't watching Netflix on their phones unless they're like on an airplane or something, and most people I see doing that are doing on like iPad or something like a bigger screen anyways. So it seems like there's opportunity. But I mean, I'm glad they're experimenting with it, because like everyone else is like kind of like doing their streaming wars thing and just focus on consolidation anyways. So that probably won't go anywhere. I'm not gonna see Paramount Plus suddenly trying to get into games. I don't think anytime soon, right? It's just but Netflix is in the position to kind of be the leader here. So I do hope they continue with that experimentation, like data collection, and I hope they're like a little more forthcoming with how that, because obviously they're known to keep a lot of their kind of data close unless they want to brag about it, and then you'll find out about it when it's numbers they want to share. But like the nice thing about mobile, of course, is that like at least with things like Sensor Tower and Data.ai, we can start to dig into that a little bit and see like what the traction looks like. Like I remember looking at one of the Transformers game they had picked up. That obviously had kind of not been doing well, and it didn't do significantly better after Netflix picked it up, but it still managed to kind of like keep the live ops going and things like that, kind of keep the game around. But it also like they end up in situations where they pick up a game like that and they picked it up for being like a game that was constantly selling IAP, and they switched to a model that's not that, and it gets kind of weird. No, actually, it was Apple Arcade that was doing that. Sorry, it was similar idea though, where they take these games that are normally premium, switch over like that, and it's kind of a weird shift. Like the game was designed around pushing the IAP and the live ops and all that stuff, then you switch it to a model where it's like not. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, and I don't know where else they're going to go outside of mobile. Like I don't see console. Like you're not going to like have a picture in picture unless they make some kind of deal with the console makers to like support like a picture in picture kind of thing where you could be playing a game and like in the thing at the same time. We did have the previous discussion about like there's support potentially for cloud gaming, and you mentioned earlier with the controllers and stuff, and there's definitely some potential there, but that seems also pretty iffy. So like as we said at the beginning of this, like I'm sure they're doing interesting things. I just don't know if they know exactly where it's going, because that's what they're trying to figure out with the data. And so I hope they figure it out, because like there's definitely a space for these two things to kind of collide as people move away from traditional TV and move towards like further even away from traditional streaming into like these sort of shifting experiences where, like, as we see, like a lot of the media based off of games doing quite well on these services. Obviously it's mixing with anime and stuff where that's another big overlap with their audience. So that seems to be working well. I would keep that up if I'm Netflix.
Yeah. I think one of the bigger challenges they're going to find is that they don't want to get into hardware, which means that controllers for this moment are going to be things that people already have, namely their phones. Phones as a controller, not the best experience. So I do hope that they are able to branch out and at least, allow Bluetooth, capable controllers. Let me use my Xbox or my PlayStation controller to play. Then I'll be happy.
That seems like something they'd have to organize with smart TVs, right? Because a lot of people are like, I mean, that's what I'm watching all the streaming services on is via smart TVs, because I don't want to have an external device set up for that. And like even, the Xbox X Cloud stuff doesn't have like its own dedicated external device. You have to have a full on Xbox console. It's like there's not like, outside of Chromecast and Amazon Fire Stick stuff, there's not really like this good sort of in between thing. And maybe it could be something they set up with Amazon, but I can't see Amazon really wanting to be friendly with Netflix given their competing service. So that becomes a problem. Like same with if they were to try and do something with Xbox. Obviously, Microsoft, is a competitor there in streaming gaming and stuff like that. That makes it kind of hard for Netflix to find a hardware solution sort of thing that is compatible with it. Outside of maybe if Google decided, Stadia didn't work out, we're not really competing in gaming. They could be an adequate partner with Chromecast and things like that. And like some of that Chromecast technology built into TVs. They built a really nice controller with the Stadia controllers that they eventually started allowing people to unlock into full Bluetooth controllers. So maybe there's an opportunity there with Google.
Yeah. Microsoft likes to share more than
the cloud enterprise services, their bigger part now, I guess, that they're getting Lotus on. So maybe we'll see the CEO be like, games aren't as important as cloud. And
maybe they'll say, look, if you have Bill Gates appear, a young Bill Gates appear in Stranger Things, then we'll work something out.
Well, now with the deepfake stuff, the young part isn't hard. So, I mean, given what they did with Michael Douglas, even in the early days of that in like Ant-Man and stuff. So I think it's pretty doable for Bill. But we'll see. Like I think a lot of figuring out to happen. Like just like with the esports, we're in like a very transitional period with a lot of these businesses as sort of like generations grow up with new technology, shift over to new things. The games business is in kind of like semi-reinvention sort of stage, I think. So, I mean, it makes it exciting for us to have these conversations, but also makes for a lot of questions where we're like, things are changing, things have got to change, but we don't know exactly where they're going to go. So hopefully we'll see, I think over the next couple of years, like some real good indicators of like maybe some success stories in this. And I guess we'll keep an eye on what Netflix does, right? Even if you're not a big fan of the games that they're doing, I think keeping an eye on which games are picking up because they have the data to back that up might be a good indicator. I mean, it's like the same thing when they start making Adam Sandler movies and you go, why are they making Adam Sandler movies? And it's like, because they do well. Like they have the data to back that up. Like you can't go wrong with Adam Sandler movie. So like just, same thing with their games. They're going to have data that proves it, whether we think it's intuitively good or not. Although I would like to see another Bandersnatch kind of experiment. I'm a little sad that maybe that didn't do super well because they haven't really followed that up. But Man vs. Wild seems to get plenty of sorts of things. So maybe that's doing better than I think. But we'll see. But anyways, lots of great stuff to explore here. Lots of great topics. I think this is stuff that I recommend everyone actually continue to dig into. Check out the Netflix games, check out what's going on, see what FaZe ends up getting up to in the next few months now that they're kind of probably going to pivot a little bit away from some of the heavy esports spending that they've done. Although I do hope we still get G Fuel flavors. That's probably the more important aspect of their business. We did manage to get, one not that long ago, that sort of Astropop one. So opportunity. But we'll look forward to that. Good stuff coming our way, hopefully, from these businesses. But in the meantime, I want to thank you guys for joining. Some good conversations, good topics here. Hopefully, games news will pick up a little bit as well. I think we're going through a little bit of a slow period. Maybe some people do some crazy things we can cover. But in the meantime, I also want to thank, of course, the listeners for tuning in. And in the meantime, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you guys next week.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.